Welcome to a new daily top Askreddit video. Today's topic: Redditors who clean up crime scenes. What's the most bizarre thing you've witnessed? Crime scene cleaner here. My first suicide cleanup was quite an experience. Man shot himself in the head in his garage. I'll never forget needing to use pliers to pull teeth and skull fragments out of the drywall behind where he sat, or that blood and brain managed to make its way more than 50 feet across the garage. Most disturbing though, was his pickup. We chose to take it to our company wash bay to pressure wash it and make sure it was as clean as possible. I cleaned it myself, and was satisfied that I had done well. Inspected for blood and couldn't find anything, so I began driving it back to the owner's garage. On the way back a slight drizzle began and switched on the wiper blades. Imagine my horror as a chunk of brain streaks across my newly cleaned windshield. I pulled over quickly and cleaned it up, but it still makes me sick to think what would have happened if it didn't rain that day. This man's poor wife or daughter would have been met with that sight and been crushed again by the impact of suicide. That 10 years ago, and I'll never forget it. Now I triple or quadruple check every job. Wow, an actual crime scene cleaner. Didn't think I'd live to see the day. Most people are dying to meet them. My younger brother died by shotgun suicide 6 months ago. While I'm beyond thankful I didn't see the aftermath, my mind wanders to some pretty dark places, wondering how bad it must have looked. Morbid, I know, but grief will influence you in strange ways. Reading your comment was oddly healing. I don't know if that's the right word. Closure inducing. Not sure how to word it, but wanting to know his final state likely stems from the things concerning the situation that I'll never have answers to. At any rate, I'm grateful for people like you who do what suffering families cannot. Thank you for choosing this line of work. It's sadly needed and profoundly appreciated. I'm so sorry for your loss, but I'm glad to hear this discussion has had a positive impact on you today. Often it can be a thankless profession, and I'm overwhelmed by the amount of people who responded with positive feedback, including yourself. I hope you find closure and peace soon. I don't clean up crime scenes, but I do remove the deceased. I can get into more accurate detail of the deceased, but here's some general stuff. Hoarders are a lot more common than they really should be, first of all. And it's never a clean hoard. It's piles of junk covered in several types of urine, shit and vomit. Mods I've never seen before, and probably insects that haven't even been discovered yet. I understand when the emergency services don't want to be in that kind of house longer than they have to, but I'll never forget having to ask them to help me because I couldn't distinguishing what was actually the deceased, and what was just a piles of random shit that looked more human than the deceased did. People will warn you bodies will bloat, and touching them the wrong way will make them leak. But the image you're conjuring up doesn't even hold a light to what it can be like. Insects skittering when you delicately lift a 400-pound deceased onto your cot, because one wrong move and they will start oozing. Oh, and the ones who had pets who were so desperate they had to eat their owner. Staring into the eyes of a big, brown-eyed mutt who is happy to finally receive human contact, and all you can't think about is how the deceased is missing their entire face. Poor things were just hungry, but it's unsettling. About to grab pizza for my work lunch and read this post. 1/10 wouldn't recommend reading if eating. 10/10 would recommend reading if not eating. Edit, there are more comments about rice than I anticipated. Edit 2, never thought my first gold or silver would have to do with eating pizza while reading a thread about bizarre cleanup stories from crime scenes. Thanks Reddit, never change. Edit 3, till platinum is a thing. I am humbled by you, Reddit. I'm a nurse. We can talk about this stuff while eating bean soup out of an emesis basin and drinking Mountain Dew out of a urine specimen cup. Some animals will starve to death rather than eat their deceased owners. I wonder what factors make the difference. Taste and preference. My dog's a pretty picky eater, so I'm safe. My aunt passed away back in February and wasn't found for about 4 days, took a nap on her favorite chair and didn't wake up. Her chihuahua, Skippy, was alone with her for the 4 days with no dog food or water. He was found dehydrated but otherwise fine and didn't touch the body. Turns out he ate half a loaf of bread that was in a grocery bag on the floor. Sometimes it depends on access to other sustenance. It is common for a dog to last 6 days without food or water before eating their deceased owner. It isn't a loyalty thing or anything. Dogs will just go into fight or flight mode once they truly figure out that you are dead and not coming back. Edit, source, my wife is a paramedic and this is what she has learned in school as well as experienced on the field. Edit 2, called my wife about this and I got it wrong. The dog is about 6 days weak or longer vs a cat which is 3 days or less, so cats are basically the savage beasts. Edit 3, I feel it is necessary to say that cats start having liver issues, hepatic lipidosis, after not eating for a few days vs dogs who can survive a lot longer without food. My job is to clear landmines. I clean war crimes, you can say, yay, bit of a stretch, I know. Recently a cow had walked into a minefield in our area of operations, and stepped on a small anti-personnel mine. However, this mine was boosted by having been buried on top of a directional fragmentation mine, gamers and soldiers, think Claymore, but bigger. The cow had literally been split in half, with cow intestines spread all over the area and hanging from trees like Abel's Christmas ornaments. Edit. Love the puns. 3. Cow intestines spread all over the area and hanging from trees like Abel's Christmas ornaments. Lovely. Just lovely. Does anyone know where the brain bleach is? r/I bleach. Family member did heavy duty cleaning including crime scenes. A guy shot his head off with a shotgun. EMTs were supposed to pick him up, literally, but missed a large chunk of brain behind a couch. That was when said family member decided to find other engagement. I can relate to this. FF/EMT. Respond to suicide with a rifle. He did nothing for us to do but pronounce. Cops cover the body, then want to escort the family out of the death scene because everyone is processed like a crime scene regardless and it is the only way in or out of the property. Before they did so, though, my partner had to point out the guy's remarkably intact brain just sitting in the tree over his body. Another one just came to mind. Drunk driver hits a tree, wasn't wearing his seatbelt and was ejected. Well, most of him anyway. His leg remained in the car while the rest of him departed it. One of only 2 traumatic amputations of major limbs I've seen survive, fingers and toes all the time, legs no. We were called to return to the scene after delivering him to the hospital because the cops didn't know what to do with his leg. And before anyone asks, no, there was absolutely no chance of reattachment. In fact, the challenge was figuring out how to get it out of the car it was trapped in. Don't drive drunk, boys and girls. And for crying out loud, wear your goddamn seat belts. All the morons going I'd rather be thrown clear obviously haven't seen what happens to the people who are. We see it all the time. Really fucked up for life people if they survive, but most don't. I occasionally work on the weekends for a funeral home. It's decent money for what is essentially 2 hours of call-out work when their normal staff is off. Last year I was called in at around 5 in the morning. A 30-something-year-old guy had killed himself, shot himself, in a pretty small 2-bedroom apartment. That wasn't the bizarre part at all since I've seen it before on call-outs. What was bizarre was what was in the apartment. Literally thousands of documents, piled on the floor, on a desk, on shelves, of people's financial information. Credit card statements, bank statements, personal data, etc. Probably 3,000 folders with all this stuff in it. Even where there weren't piles of folders, there were just loose papers, magnetic cards, surveillance cameras. It was just the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And of course, some of these documents and folders had blood and brains splattered all over them. Didn't matter to me though since the detective on scene had said it was fine to take the body. The police had to clear a path by collecting the papers from the route we would take from the door to the apartment to where he was. A couple of months later, it came out that the guy had over $1 million in cash and Bitcoin. Apparently the state police were onto him and he decided he didn't want to try to run with his 7 figures or go to jail for what would have been probably less than 10 years. Hit up r/stupid theft because you never know who is stealing your financial information. So he killed himself b/c the state police were onto him or was someone trying to get after his money and the whole thing was a setup. Also, any follow-up since then? Lastly, it came out that the guy had $1 million in cash. That was nice of the police to turn in the $900,000 that was left at the scene. I can't believe he was carrying $800,000 cash like that. No wonder the police were after him. He was probably up to something suspicious if he just had $700,000 in cash. You're very right, it's very odd that he had $600,000 in cash just lying around. But if that's how he wants to store his $500,000 cash then who are we to judge? My best friend used to have this job. Most of the bizarre stuff was cleaning up suicides. Found a guy's full intact mustache across the room when he blew his head off with a shotgun. One guy tried to kill himself by shooting his stomach with a small caliber pistol. He didn't die immediately, so he wrote tons of whacked out stuff on the walls with his blood, then finished the job. Found a guy's full intact mustache across the room when he blew his head off with a shotgun. Did your friend put the mustache on his face like a Mr. Potato Head and then talk in a funny accent to his co-crime scene cleaner? That's a sitcom I would watch. Like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, but way more fucked up. One guy tried to kill himself by shooting his stomach with a small caliber pistol. He didn't die immediately. A similar thing happened near where I grew up. Guy got dumped, so he showed up at the ex's house when her parents weren't home. She didn't open the door, so he shot himself in the stomach. He apparently alternated between yelling at her and shooting himself. He had to reload before he finally passed away. My dad answered a call about a guy who killed himself in a playground. He shot himself 6 times in the head. Dad said no one would believe it was suicide if there hadn't been dozens of horrified people around watching.